If you hold Ripple's XRP, then be prepared because it looks like it's getting primed to explode to the upside for a $10 XRP price target and at least a 300% gain on some key events and news that are happening right now. And although it's currently lagging behind Bitcoin, and Bitcoin just hit a new all-time high daily close of over $108,000, currently sitting at $109,800 in one of the worst months in crypto history, May. Typically, the old phrase goes, sell in May and look away. But this is gearing up to be one of the strongest performing Mays we have on record. This speaks volume to the levels of the appetite of the market for crypto and risk on assets where the whole macro environment seems uncertain. People are buying cryptos and selling their dollars. Now, I know yesterday we covered the fact that Ripple and Coinbase seem to be in a bidding war for Circle and their USDC stablecoin. Currently, all the rumors confirm that Ripple is in the lead in this bidding war. There's between a $6 to $11 billion price tag, even though this says 9. I've read other articles and talking heads share that it's anywhere in between. But what's more interesting is the fact that some members in the community did some digging and found that if Circle is acquired by Ripple and the XRP, if Circle is acquired by Ripple, then the price of XRP would likely skyrocket, but just how high? Well, we covered that at the beginning of this video, but we'll actually share the information and data behind it and what the reasoning for this is. Even the event has the ability to pop this thing off, especially with Bitcoin hitting new all-time highs. And the fact that now Texas, the 8th largest economy in the world, will be allowed to buy Bitcoin because they just passed their strategic Bitcoin reserve bill. And if things couldn't get even more bullish, people are very bearish on the dollar. In other words, they want to get rid of their dollars or trade them in for asset classes that show potential in the future, not to be inflationary, but actually deflationary. And that would be none other than Bitcoin. So we're going to cover this article here and explain the future thesis for Bitcoin and arguably crypto. A lot of that money is going to rotate into other cryptos like XRP, considering XRP has been relatively strong to the entire market. It is one of the best and safest bets into the next 5 years. In other words, if you're watching this video before XRP hits $3, you're still early. And we're also going to cover the XRP chart and specifically this one indicator that is showing us that as XRP continues to play in this tight range, it's getting ready for an explosive move to the upside. We'll also be diving into this post that explains how the XRP is superior to a lot of these centralized organizations, because recently Coinbase was hacked and we saw all sorts of news surrounding that deal. But Ripple's CTO, David Schwartz, who actually goes by Joel Katz on Twitter, could actually see this thing happening from a mile away, which is why he actually worked hard to engineer the XRPL to have DIDs. And we're going to explain what that is and why this technology and approach to onboarding users is extremely valuable for any blockchain to have. And finally, we will be covering some of the futures data and what day traders are currently doing so you can stay ahead of the curve. And as always, my friend, if you're feeling blessed and bullish, comment 777. And if you're going to be the wealthiest person in your family tree, smash the subscribe button. Hello and welcome back to the channel. If you're new here, my name is Paul and you can find me on Twitter or X at PaulieDeFi, PaulieDeFi. And really quickly, before we begin the video, if you haven't already, I know a lot of you have already seen this over and over and over again, but we're always giving away free money in XRP. You can enter our weekly giveaway to have a chance to win $100 worth of XRP. Here's was last week's winner. And all you need to do in 3 simple steps is like the pinned post from Bull Runners HQ over on X or Twitter, comment XRP below the post, and then subscribe to our daily crypto newsletter right here, bullrunners.com/altcoin secrets. And we will be announcing the winner of this giveaway every single Sunday. And guess what? Not that many people have entered. So when you really do the math, at the end of the day, just because this has 101 likes does not mean everyone qualifies, because not everyone actually follows the steps. And we do double verify that they have done all of the steps. The winner will be random and announced at the end of the week. So go ahead and do that for your chance to win. Now, before we dive into XRP in the charts, I think it's important to cover Bitcoin, not because we're maxis over here on the channel in any one direction. It's just that Bitcoin is a large portion of the market. And we're talking right now, it has a $2.15 trillion market cap. XRP is sitting at $140 billion. The majority of the money over the course of the last couple of years has consistently been flowing into Bitcoin, and that does show up in the Bitcoin dominance chart. In other words, it is the majority of the money in the market, and because of that, it's like the mothership. If Bitcoin is in a healthy place, then that leaves room for the rest of the cryptos to also have room for growth. As Bitcoin tops off, more often than not, you will see money rotate out of Bitcoin and into many of the strongest altcoins. One of those obviously being XRP, and that's been proven to be true considering it's sitting at number 4 market cap and has really gained steam since November in the election, and because there is going to be pro-crypto regulation. So when we look at this article over on Forbes, Bitcoin hitting a new all-time high in a typically terrible month is huge. And right now, Bitcoin is sucking much of the air out of the room for other cryptos and eating up dominance. And this is likely in anticipation of the fact that the Genius Act, which is a stablecoin bill, was approved at the Senate and still needs to pass the floor. But if it does, it will be signed into law by Donald Trump because he's a huge proponent of crypto and stablecoins. And just today, about $111 billion was added to the global crypto market. Combine that with the fact that a strategic reserve was created and passed in Texas. And if you were to actually take Texas, it is such a big economy that it is the 8th largest in the world if Texas was its own country. So imagine their type of buying power behind Bitcoin as well. This is why Bitcoin has consistently been growing and growing and growing and outpacing virtually everything else in the crypto market. And this is further proven to be true when you look at the one simple chart. You don't need a bunch of on-chain analytics, but this right here is Bitcoin on exchanges. The purple line is Bitcoin available to buy on exchanges, which means people have either deposited on exchange whenever it's going up in order to likely sell, because why would you keep it on exchange unless you want to keep it available to sell? On the flip side, when it's withdrawn, this is due to institutional buying more often than not, especially when you see a trend this strong to the downside, especially like right here. You can see that a lot of Bitcoin was ripped off exchanges because they don't have plans to sell at any point in the near future, and you have a lot of ETF buyers who then have to custodian it through players like Coinbase, and they have to actually withdraw and hold that Bitcoin in a very secure manner off the exchange. So that's actually what's been happening. And this trend is so steady and strong to the downside into this new all-time high that it leads me to believe that as long as demand even remains the same and supply continues to go down, then the price of Bitcoin is going to hit some insane new all-time highs. And if I went ahead and pulled up a Fibonacci scale on Bitcoin, which I did, I would reasonably expect Bitcoin to increase to maybe about $170,000 at bare minimum this bull market cycle, which would be about a 62% gain. Now, I'm not a fortune teller. I don't know the future, but with this type of demand and this type of strength in a very poor month, typically, it leads me to believe that Bitcoin's going to go higher than I even think. I'm just being very conservative. And so with Bitcoin into new all-time high territory, again, it's important to note that even if the cryptos that you've been eyeballing, things like XRP, haven't really performed to the same degree yet, that doesn't mean that one day they likely won't pop off. So I wouldn't over-rotate. I wouldn't be moving money out of XRP to go buy Bitcoin, because at the end of the day, your potential gains on something like XRP when it does start to fly are going to be far greater. And more often than not, it's lagging, which means, again, money like likely is going to rotate into something like XRP. What even makes this more bullish, this is truly the bullish case for Bitcoin, is the fact that the Fed is no longer in control. It is currently a new regime where Bitcoin is the perfect fit to any portfolio when it comes to reckless government spending and inflationary environments, and the Fed not being able to handle their own bond market and balance sheet. And so here is a video of a macro analyst, Lynn Alden, explaining it really well. Let's have a listen.
Over this whole kind of 2020 to now, so 5 years, this whole period of inflation we've had, above average inflation, that's not because of excessive bank lending. That's because of fiscal stimulus and the associated ramifications from that. And central bank tools don't really address that. And on the edges can even make it worse, because if they raise interest rates as they have, it slows down bank lending, but then it blows out the fiscal deficit even more, which is already the source of it. Their tools just don't work quite the same as they do under monetary dominance. And so it's a whole different regime compared to the 1980s to late 2010s environment.
In other words, the only true solution that many central banks and governments around the world can see away from the dollar, even with stablecoin bills and legislation, is a hedge. And that only hedge in a truly decentralized manner would be something like Bitcoin. And again, it's hard to disprove that when you have a market cap the size of Bitcoin. There's too much belief in this market. It would arguably be no different, even if you disagree with the tech or say it's crap. It'd be no different than the US dollar. During a period of time over the last century, people believed in the US dollar. However, that was truly inflationary and run by a central bank. Bitcoin, even if you have major miners and players like MicroStrategy or Strategy with Michael Saylor, or whether or not you believe the NSA is behind something like Bitcoin, still holds a stupid amount or a tremendous amount of belief among many investors worldwide, which is why I believe this new regime, you're still going to have a ton of money flowing into Bitcoin, whether you like it or not. But either way, this is extremely good for the rest of the crypto market. And so I thoroughly expect as Bitcoin continues to do well, XRP is likely going to follow. Already we're off those major lows right down here at 160, currently sitting at about $2.40 for a 31% gain. And when you track it against Bitcoin, again, it is lagging. You can see at one point it was leading slightly sometime in April, and then through the rest of the month from the end of April into present day, Bitcoin, which is this purple line, has actually been outperforming. In other words, if you put $100 into Bitcoin over XRP, you'd be up 46% on Bitcoin and only 31% on XRP. But typically when XRP is lagging in similar fashion like this, in a few weeks or even a week, you'll see XRP explode like it did right here on May 7th, all the way into the highs of May 14th. In other words, 1 week's time, XRP exploded. And that's because it requires less money to move. So I thoroughly expect XRP to do something similar, and that does not mean that I would be rotating out of something like XRP. Now, on that note, if you were to go ahead and pull up a Bollinger Band, and again, I'm currently on a 4-hour time frame, you can see that we're starting to get a nice little range of a squeeze right here. And typically what follows contractions in price is expansions in price. So then I want to start to look at, okay, if I do believe that we are trending to the upside, how do I confirm that? Well, I have a series of what? Our lowest low right here at about $1.60. Where did our next high come in? Here. Next lows here. Next high here. Next low here. Next high here. And this is shaping up to be a new low. In other words, I have a series of higher lows. This low is higher than this low, is higher than this low. This high is higher than this high, is higher than this high. And so generally speaking, when you see a trend like this, the trend is what? Up, and the trend is your friend. So whenever we get a breakout just above the $2.40 some cent range here, I can reasonably expect us to go right back up to 265. And by the way, when you zoom out, let me go ahead and do that really quickly. You can see that any price above 260 is going to be major bull territory for XRP, because it'll fly right through there up to $3. And at $3, I mean, we're in bull territory. Like I said, anything above $3, anything above even 340 is likely going to take us to $5 and potentially even 10 in a major bull market rally. And so the reason I think that XRP could potentially hit something like $10 is because it tends to rally extremely strong after lagging a bit. We've seen that that over and over and over again when it comes to its explosive gains in a short period of time. We saw that in November all the way into January for a 3-month period where it outperformed everything else. And this tends to happen often. So any major news like Ripple successfully acquiring Circle will likely be the catalyst in a bull market environment. And Bitcoin is already proving that that is the case. So someone went ahead and plugged in all of these targets right here. Currently, Circle is sitting at about a $60+ billion market cap, but their actual revenues are a bit lower. Still, Ripple is sitting on a boatload of cash and XRP, and they already acquired the $1.25 billion Hidden Road Prime broker, which is one of the biggest acquisitions of its day. If you were to combine that with their ability to actually buy Circle, they would essentially dominate the entire crypto market as a company and be the biggest by far, and arguably flip Ethereum and then make a run for Bitcoin, although I think it's going to be hard this bull market cycle for anything like that to actually happen, for XRP to overtake Bitcoin. But either way, this person plugged in the scenario into ChatGPT, and on the low side it was $350 to $450 on a price target, on the high side between $6 to $10. But again, my personal experience with something like XRP leads me to believe that in a truly bull market scenario, in a situation where we get a lot of a nice tight squeeze into a strong uptrend in a good market, there's no reason that something like XRP couldn't pump all the way to $10 at minimum, which by the way would be about our 241 fib target right up here for about $9.90 to $10. And that would take us for a gain of about 310 to 320%. And again, I'm not perfectly on the ball right here, but a $10 target seems extremely reasonable this bull market cycle for something like XRP, because even though the market cap would be insane, it doesn't require nearly as much liquidity in the market to pump it like that. So yes, you can see a blow off top up to $10 or something near that target before there seems to be some sell pressure. But with this type of strong demand down here at the $2 range and a strong support, this leads me to believe there are far more institutional players that have an appetite for it, and also just diamond hands. There are far more buyers or holders than there are sellers. This has actually outperformed virtually every other major market cap crypto, even in the downturn. So when it comes to relative strength, XRP is looking really hot. Now, really quickly on this piece of news surrounding the Coinbase hack and how Ripple's XRPL solves some of these problems is the fact that these centralized exchanges like Coinbase have to collect customer data. In other words, sensitive info that was leaked in a hack. And this will typically always happen with centralized entities. We see it all the time. Ripple's CTO, David Schwartz, who goes by Joel Katz, talked about this last year and saw it coming from a mile away. In order to understand this, and we're going to go ahead and read this because it's really important for y'all to understand why decentralization is so beautiful and valuable, especially when it comes to ZK rollups, is the fact that David identified it as a cost for companies. They have to collect your personal info, but it doesn't actually make money. The reason that they have to do this, and it costs them money to do it, is because of governmental entities. So they don't have intrinsic incentive to keep your info safe. Pretty much every company would rather not keep all of your sensitive details, and David showed the solution: decentralized identifiers, or DIDs. And guess what? That DID amendment is now live on the XRPL. In other words, they can actually fulfill their KYC requirements for regulators. However, they don't have to collect all of the sensitive data every single time. In other words, if Coinbase had used DID, something that Ripple has already built and developed for their ecosystem in XRPL, this hack wouldn't have even happened. This is how beautiful the engineering is with the XRP team and Ledger. And so if you're buying or holding XRP right now, we are truly on the forefront of a financial revolution, and arguably just a price revolution for our own bank accounts. That said, I'm going to go ahead and go to CoinGlass right now and check out the liquidation maps and see what day traders are currently doing in the futures markets. I typically like to look at Bitcoin and then XRP first to get a good feel and an example. I go ahead and put it on a 7-day time frame so it shows me more data, and then I remove the different exchanges and just focus on where the current price is, where the longs will be liquidated and the shorts will be liquidated. And as you can see, the majority of players in the market are actually extremely long, to the tune of $14.9 billion, where on the short side, we only have about $5 billion. So the weight of this ocean is currently leaning long. This means it's really healthy and good, and that Bitcoin looks like it's ready to explode. Now, with this amount of leverage, it would require a stupid amount of capital and money in order to liquidate all of these players. And I found that I like to trade in the direction, even though it sounds counterintuitive, where all of the money is actually going. So to simplify, whenever we get a bigger area right over on the left-hand side that is red, the longs or the bulls are in control, and that will likely continue. Then I'm going to go ahead and pull up this same chart for XRP, and then we're going to put it on that 7-day time frame, remove these guys again, and you can see right now there's a decent amount of shorts to the tune of 312 million versus longs at 250. So we're relatively even, but not terribly. In other words, right now would be a good time to accumulate XRP, because right now a lot of traders are a little bit short. But because we're tightening, and because the trend is up, and because Bitcoin put in a new all-time high, even if there's a slight breakdown, I'd be buying those dips, because generally speaking, I'd like to be long, and I would expect this thing to be far longer than shorter here in the near future. Or better yet, for bulls to remain in control of the actual trend, even though in the short term we might get a slight other breakdown back to maybe like $2.30. And so that's it for the video, folks. If you enjoyed it, be sure to subscribe to the channel, and also be sure to head on over to Altcoin Pro if you want to check out Altcoin Pro University and join one of our 1,000 members in this community, where they have access to all sorts of classes and courses like the technical analysis essentials that I put together, and we do have raving reviews on that, as well as access to altcoin picks and DeFi yields and airdrops as the market starts to rally. You don't want to miss out on any of this. We have a professional team of analysts and researchers that show you step by step how to take advantage of this through one of our DeFi quick win yield farms. In other words, many of these yield farms don't require much of your crypto capital that you already own to literally sit it aside inside of one of these farms, and then to earn or return on that. And guess what? It'll likely pay back that $97 a month. If we can't help you to earn back your $97 a month inside of this community, then go ahead and ask for a refund within 14 days and we'll get that to you. This isn't for everyone, but for those of you guys who are serious about becoming a crypto millionaire, go ahead and check out altcoinpro.com. And that is it for the video, folks. Thanks so much for watching, and I will see you in the next one. Goodbye.